The Haunted Apartment.
Hi, I used to live in a townhouse in Rosenberg, Texas, in the mid-1990s. We had an older man named Johnny who was the maintenance man, and he had a friend named Ted that would help him do the maintenance work for the townhouses. So when people would move out, Johnny and Ted would have to clean up the apartment, fix it up, and get it ready for the new occupants. Johnny would tell me that people would leave the most outrageous things behind. He claims that most people never even cleaned up the place when they left, leaving most of their valuables behind. Well, one day, Johnny the maintenance man told me that something horrible happened to him the night before. He had spent the night in one of the apartments that he was cleaning out, and he claims that he was alone in the apartment around 1 o'clock in the morning, and instead of driving back home, he decided to spend the night since there was so much work to be done. Ted, his friend that usually helps him, didn't come that night to help Johnny, so Johnny was all alone and the electricity was off. But Johnny the maintenance man had his flashlight, and he said that he had some candles with him, and he had made a small sleeping area on the carpet floor and laid down to sleep to try to get some rest before he had to wake up in a few hours to start work again. He claims in the middle of the night he was awoken by someone calling his name in the room. No one was in the room at the time. He thought it was his imagination and went back to sleep. But then he woke up again about an hour later, feeling sharp pain coming from beneath his feet. He moved the blanket from his feet and he saw that he had red marks under his feet, as if someone was scratching his feet. He said it was really painful, and he got up and walked around the room to brush it off. He then heard a noise coming from the closet. That's when he opened the closet door, and to his surprise, there was a Ouija board on the top shelf. Whoever lived there cleaned out the whole apartment, but left the Ouija board behind. He got chills all over his body when he saw it, and quickly threw the board in the trash outside the apartment. He went back to sleep, and then was awoken a third time, feeling pain coming from his feet again, as if someone was punching the bottom of his heels. He jumped up and quickly opened the closet door to see if the board was still there, and to his surprise, even after throwing the Ouija board away, the board was in the same original spot it was in, on the closet top shelf. He got his keys as fast as he could, claiming that it felt as if he was being watched. The whole time his flashlight wasn't working anymore for some reason, and he couldn't find his candles. He had to find his way in the dark out of the apartment. And he claims while he was going down the stairs in the dark, he heard something right behind him following him down the stairs. While he was driving away, he said he saw a cloaked black figure looking out the bedroom window that he was sleeping in. He said he never went back to that apartment, and he's always stayed away from Ouija boards.
Paranormal story number 2. The Tallman bunk beds.
In Wisconsin, in early February of 1987, Alan and Debbie Tallman purchased bunk beds at a second-hand shop. They stored them in their basement, but 3 months later, in May of 1987, they moved the bunk beds upstairs to their kids' bedroom. This marked 9 months of paranormal experiences for the family that has ever been recorded. Strange occurrences began to happen nightly. The first night the bunk beds were upstairs, their oldest son went into his parents' room, claiming that his radio clock was playing music by itself and turning through different stations on its own. Alan, the father, got upset, thinking that his oldest son was being immature and just playing around, and took the radio away from him and warned him to behave. Another night, as their kids were asleep, they were awoken by something or someone crawling on the ground, portraying a dog and growling at them. Even though it was dark in the room, they could still see the outline of a dark shadow crawling in and out from underneath their bunk beds. Also, their daughter would explain that there was a fire in her room. When Alan and Debbie went to investigate, they found nothing. About a week later, one quiet night, Alan and Debbie heard their daughter screaming. When they came to see what was wrong, she claimed there was a witch with red eyes behind her bedroom door. Later that week, Alan Tallman came home from working night shift around 2 o'clock in the morning. After pulling in the driveway and getting out of his car, he began to hear howling in the wind. The wind began to pick up, and the howling got louder. He then heard a voice say, "Come here." from around the side of the house. He walked over to the side of the house, and there was nothing there. When he came back around the corner to the front of the garage, to his shock and to his horror, the garage was on fire, with flames reaching past the rooftop. He quickly went into his house to retrieve a fire extinguisher, and when he came back outside, there was no fire, nor any indication of one. He walked inside the house and closed the front door in disbelief. As he reached down to pick up his lunch kit, it was thrown across the living room by an unknown entity. There was a night where Mr. Tallman had to go to work and asked his brother Todd to stay the night with his family to protect them from whatever was haunting their house. That night, around 2 o'clock in the morning, Todd was asleep on the floor of the kid's bedroom when he was awoken by a noise he heard coming from the closet. Fog began to slowly appear out of nowhere. He then sat up and stared at the closet door as it began to slowly open. What happened next will forever be a secret that no one knows. A bright light filled the room, and Todd witnessed something truly terrifying. He screamed. With no emotion on his face, we will never know what he saw, and to this day he doesn't want to tell anyone. He never said exactly what he saw at that moment, but Debbie entered the room and began to grab her children. She asked Todd what did he see, but he did not answer her. He slowly walked out of the room like a zombie, with no facial expressions at all. After about a minute, he then snapped out of it and began to get the rest of the kids out of the house, and they left the house that night. The family then immediately had the bunk beds crushed by a bulldozer, and not long after that, they moved out of their house hoping that the ghost or entity would never follow them ever again.
The entities on the roof.
12 years ago, when I was 20, I had been married for 2 years and had 2 kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, and my husband worked as a landscaper. We lived in a double-wide trailer. One night, I was at home alone because the kids were visiting their grandparents, and I decided to relax and watch a movie. Our home was about a mile away from the nearest neighbor's house. It rested atop a large hill that was surrounded by dense forest. I had barely started the movie when I heard what sounded like a kitten meowing outside. I got up and decided to investigate. I went outside and immediately noticed something wasn't right. The meowing sounded like it was coming from about 20 feet up in a large oak tree. When I walked over and stood directly underneath the branches, the meowing turned into a deep growling, not like a dog, but someone pretending to be a dog. It was too dark out to see anything clearly. I was beginning to get scared, and that's when I decided to go back inside and lock the door. While I contemplated whether or not I would be overreacting by calling the police, that's when I heard a loud boom on my roof, followed by the most insane, high-pitched scream I had ever heard. I covered my eyes and ran to the bedroom and grabbed the shotgun. I was shaking with fear because I knew something or someone was trying to scare me, and this whole ordeal wasn't normal. You could just feel that it was something different. I called my husband at work, and just as he answered, the noises started again, only deeper and longer. He told me to hang up and call the police, but I knew they wouldn't be out there for at least another hour or two. So instead, I decided to stand facing the window with the shotgun. After a few moments, what looked like a dark shadow-like entity jumped down in front of the window facing me. It had complete red glowing eyes. After staring at me for a few seconds, it then growled. I was in disbelief at what I was looking at, and just then, I heard another sound on top of the roof. And just like the first one, another dark entity jumped down off the roof, staring right at me. It was standing right next to the first entity. Instinctively, I cocked back the hammer on the shotgun. I didn't want to shoot through the window if I could help it, but I wasn't going to let them get into my house. It looked like they pressed their faces to the window, and all I could think about was how silent it was, and all of a sudden how pulling the trigger would break the silence. I'm not sure how long we locked eyes, but I suddenly noticed a pair of headlights coming up the driveway. I recognized my husband's car. I wanted to scream out for him not to get out of the car, but before I could even open my mouth, Both black entities jumped back onto the roof and into the darkness. My husband never caught a glimpse of them and ultimately didn't believe me, but his mother did and confided in me that she had seen them before. She believed that they were some kind of demon-like entity. Over the next few years before we moved away, I would occasionally hear meowing from the trees and around my house at night, but I would never go out to investigate, not after what happened the last time. I'm not sure what they were, but paranormal or not, I don't ever want to find out what they wanted from me.
True, scary, paranormal story number 2. The Woman in White.
When I was 7, we lived in a very old and completely empty house without furniture or even bathrooms. If you had to go to the restroom, you needed to leave the house and you'd had to go outside and use the outhouse. An outhouse was a restroom that was outside, and they used to make those back in the day. This outhouse had a very heavy rusty door that never wanted to open easily. One night I was sleeping upstairs, but I heard something in the kitchen beneath me. Assuming it was my parents, I went downstairs thinking they might share a snack with me, but to my surprise, there was no one there and nobody had passed me to go back upstairs. Since I was already downstairs, I decided to go outside to the bathroom. For some reason, I wasn't afraid given the circumstances. I opened the squeaky door and did my business and shoved the heavy door back open again, intending to head back to bed. I looked up at the house and noticed through the window on the ground floor a woman in white. And when the outhouse door slammed shut behind me, she turned and made eye contact with me. I stood dead frozen, staring dumbfounded back at her. Suddenly, terrified that I had no idea who this woman was, I closed my eyes and waited for a moment, and when I opened my eyes again, she was gone. I sprinted back into the house the long way just to avoid the room that she had been standing in. I ran upstairs and huddled terrified in my room until I fell asleep again. I never told anyone what I saw. Now fast forward to when I was 10 years old and living in another house. I shared a bedroom with my 2 brothers, and my sister slept in the room across the hall. I woke up around 2 o'clock in the morning because I heard the sound of footsteps across the hall, walking over to the glass panel door on my sister's side. I saw a small girl who I assumed to be my sister. She was dressed in all white and pressing herself against the panel from inside my sister's room, and she was staring right back at me. I opened my door and asked her if everything was all right, but being able to see her much clearly now that there was only one panel of glass between us, I realized with a sinking feeling in my stomach that it definitely wasn't my sister. The girl didn't answer as she stared back at me with eyes that seemed entirely too wide and dark. I slammed my door shut and leapt back into my bed. It took me hours before I fell back to sleep. I didn't tell anyone about what I saw. The last incident was last year. When I was 17 years old, I was playing football for my high school at the time. I was sleeping in my own room and was awoken by a muttering sound from outside my door. I thought it was my mother, but what really disturbed me was that the voice was chanting something extremely rapid in another language that definitely wasn't English, and my mother doesn't speak any other languages other than English. Part of me really wanted to get back up and open the door, but I felt a chill. Then the voice completely stopped and I found myself unable to move. I don't know how long I was paralyzed, but it was not until the sun began to rise that I felt I was able to move again on my own. I have no idea if it's the same entity that's been haunting me. If anyone knows or has any suggestions, please let me know.
The Horned Creature.
Hi, I was born in 1983. Every summer I would visit my aunt's farm in South Wales. I was out in the countryside that had many acres of land with fields, forests, and streams. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I had already spent a couple of summers there, and I knew the land quite well. I would spend 4 to 6 weeks there at a time. Because I was comfortable around the grounds, I never felt worried about exploring on my own. I would be hanging around the hay bales in the barn, or riding my mountain bike around the fields, or just generally looking around to see what I could find. But one day, it was musky and foggy outside, and also eerily silent. I was in the grassy fields next to the farmhouse. I wasn't doing anything exciting. To be honest, I can't even remember what I was doing there. Suddenly, I started hearing my name being called as clear as day. Michael, Michael, Mike. I looked around and I couldn't see anyone. Another nephew of my aunt, whose name was Nick, also lived on the farm. He's older than me, and he would always enjoy playing tricks on me whenever he got the chance. I thought it was him. I heard the voice calling out to me again. It was actually said in a manner that didn't sound panicked or menacing, but just trying to get my attention. I looked around and noticed, off in the distance, there was a horse stall, and I could see a person inside of it calling to me and waving their arms above their head, as you would expect when someone is trying to get your attention. "Nick, what are you doing in there?" I shouted as I started to walk towards the stall. I thought it must have been him, but from where I was standing, it didn't really look like him. It was really weird because whoever it was appeared to have horns on top of their head that curved backwards. I was quite far though, so I thought that Nick might have had a stupid hat on or something. I continued to walk closer, and as I did, the figure in the stalls seemed to fade. When I got there to the stall, it was completely empty. There was only one way a person could have gotten out, and that was directly in front of me. Not only that the horse stall was in the middle of a large field and there was nowhere they could hide, but someone had definitely been there calling out to me and waving. They had a pair of horns on their head, and I definitely saw them fading as I approached. I ran straight back to the farmhouse and found Nick and my aunt and uncle sitting at the kitchen table. I asked Nick if he had been outside calling to me, and he laughed and said, "I've been here for hours, mate." Both my aunt and uncle confirmed this. To this day, I have no explanation as to who or what that thing in the horse stall was, but it's a memory I'll never, ever forget.